This Zenith Seed, or also known as the Everything Seed, is the absolute hardest challenge Terraria has to offer, including custom world generation, increased difficulty, and your spawn is in hell. So what would happen if I combined it with Terraria's most well-known mod's hardest difficulty, Calamity's Death Mode? Is this combination even doable? I have no idea, so join me to find out. We start off today's episode by going to the Sunken Seas biome. I'm there to create a pylon setup so that I have easy access to the underground desert. Our next boss is the Desert Scourge, which you would normally fight on the surface. But because we're playing on this stupid Zenith Seed, that's really not an option. So we're gonna have to make a new arena underground. And you might be wondering, what do you mean make a new arena? There's clearly a working arena right next to you. Actually, wrong. Trying to fight the Desert Scourge here spawns a hard mode boss with 200,000 HP. And why is this? Well, simple explanation, I'm a dumbass. I built the arena way too close to the Sunken Seas biome. But before we do any arena mining, I need to find the jungle. For one reason. Since we're playing Summoner, whips are a crucial part of our loadout. The strongest whip that's available to us right now is the Snapthorn whip, which applies poison and is an overall upgrade to our leather whip. I spent hours looking for the jungle. I looked all around the left side of the map, but I couldn't find it. And I was starting to get nervous. What if the jungle just didn't exist? Since that technically could be possible, if for example the Sunken Seas had generated on top of it. I'm not sure if I'm dumb, but I always thought that the jungle would be like on the opposite side of the snow biome, so I was sure that it would have to be on the left side. I went to take a quick look on the right side of the world and found it immediately. Having found the jungle, I had one goal. Find enough jungle spores, vines and stingers, so that I could craft the Snapthorn whip. But little did I know that this jungle was gonna be a huge pain in the ass. Instead of spawning bees, the beehives in this jungle spawn Calamity enemies that are normally found at the end of hard mode. Each of these encounters took an annoyingly long time to deal with, since they had way more health compared to normal pre-hard mode enemies. After having gathered all the materials that I needed for the Snapthorn, I then quickly recalled home to a welcome surprise of a goblin army invasion, which I honestly really needed, since defeating the goblin army gives you access to the goblin tinker, who sells you the rocket boots and allows you to gamble, and also allows you to gamble. I fucking hate that dude. Anyway, after defeating the goblin army, I realized something. The enemies in the jungle dropped me these plague canisters, which are normally only found at the end of hard mode. I honestly don't believe that this is intentional, so I'm not gonna be using these to craft anything that I normally shouldn't be able to craft. After crafting my Snapthorn, I quickly headed back to the underground desert to begin to prepare the arena for Desert Scourge. And oh boy, let me tell you, was this fun. Since for some fucking reason, antlions now spit out like 100 blocks of sand, instead of the one that they usually spit out. This essentially meant that every time an antlion spawned, I had to spend a minute clearing out sand blocks. I don't know whose fucking idea this was, but like, please fire him. Like, please. Please. Anyway, once I had cleared out all the sand blocks, it was time to challenge the Desert Scourge. And honestly, this boss was quite something. I know he's supposed to be the first boss of Calamity, but I do not remember him being this hard. So I don't know what the Zenith Seed does to him, but he had somehow acquired the world's most advanced jump prediction technology known to man. No matter what direction I tried to dodge, his massive head would still somehow hit me. And the contact damage was brutal, dealing up to 150 damage per hit. On my first attempt, I got him to half health. After which, this happened. Dude, why the fuck does it keep spawning the Aquatic Scourge? What is this? Please, game. I was starting to get pretty upset. The unfair difficulty, combined with the random chance of him turning into the Aquatic Scourge, were making me lose my mind. I was, however, starting to form a strategy. I would focus on his head on my minimap, and when he dashed towards me, I'd use my double jump at the perfect time to get out of the way of his attack. And then there was second phase, where he would spawn two equally as annoying desert nuisances. Dude, that was a hard word to say. This was the moment that I realized how difficult the challenge was truly going to be. And for those who are confused, why do I have the optic staff? The Zenith Seed switches around some hard mode jobs with pre-hard mode jobs. One of those being the optic staff, which can now be obtained from the Eye of Cthulhu, which we defeated in the last episode. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I was stuck. Stuck on what was supposed to be the first official boss of pre-hard mode. I would without fail die every time the boss entered his second phase. I would get completely overwhelmed the second he'd spawn those two fuckers in. I was thinking about quitting. I felt completely hopeless, like bashing my wall. Like bashing my head into a brick wall, and I was starting to get tilted. This was until I had this attempt happen. I popped my rage, and I managed to kill one of the worms. I realized how considerably easier the fight got immediately after the worm had died. All I had to do was to make sure that as the boss entered his second phase, I would have my adrenaline and rage ready. And now's probably a good time to explain what rage and adrenaline are. Rage and adrenaline are those two bars that you see right next to my hotbar. The red one is rage. They both work in a similar way. Once the bar fills up, you can activate it and you gain a damage multiplier. Rage builds up when you're close to enemies, and adrenaline builds up only during boss fights when you're not getting hit. So after suffering for hours on end, I finally had this attempt happen. While the boss was still in his first phase, I was trying my absolute hardest to not lose my adrenaline. As the boss entered his second phase, I popped both rage and adrenaline at the same time, completely melting away the two worms. And all I had to do now was not choke. No, I did not choke. We had finally done it. After many hours of attempts, the Desert Scourge has finally fallen. I opened the treasure bag and realized that the Desert Scourge had dropped me an item that's normally only obtainable after defeating the mechanical bosses at the beginning of hard mode. I didn't think much of it. I instead set my sights on our next boss, the Eater of Worlds. Even though this is a drunk world, meaning it has both Crimson and Corruption, I will only be killing the Corruption counterparts of these bosses. For what reason, you may ask? I'm lazy. Before heading out, I crafted myself a set of Fictite armor, which was a direct upgrade to our Flank's fur coat. Oh, and I actually forgot to mention that I also killed Crabillon. Nothing much to say about this fight, it's pretty straightforward. I just smacked him with my whip and my summons took care of him. He had this weird effect where there was like rainbow colored copies of him, and I guess it was kinda supposed to like trick me, but he was always in the middle, so defeating him was way too easy. Nothing much to say about him, except that he dropped us the Fungal Clump and the Plasma Root. What the Plasma Root does is that it increases our rage by 1 second. With all of that behind us, it's now time for the Eater of Worlds. And this is where I got really concerned for the future of this challenge. I was already skeptical of the vanilla bosses in this challenge. With Calamity bosses, it was clear that they were difficult, but they were doable. But when it came to bosses that were from the vanilla Terraria game, I noticed something was a little off. Because in the Zenith Seed, there's a seed called For the Worthy, which increases boss difficulty. I'm not sure if this applies to Calamity bosses, but what I am sure of is that both Calamity Death Mode and For the Worthy apply to vanilla bosses, which means some of them will be extremely difficult, so I will resort to any means necessary when it comes to defeating those bosses. I will not use any glitches, but if you see some cheesy behavior, just know that I most likely had no other option. And if you're wondering, why did we choose the Eater of Worlds? Wouldn't the brain be easier for Summoner? It's because the brain fight looked like this.
Back with another milk. Help! 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 Help me! Help!
Yeah. I then headed to the nearest corruption altar and crafted the worm's summoning item. As I summoned the worm, there was a little surprise. You know how I said worm? I actually meant 4 worms. There were 4 of them. Yeah. I had already summoned him once before, as shown on the video. I thought that there were maybe 2 of them, but I had no clue that they'd be 4. I was in complete shock and died almost immediately. This boss was the biggest challenge that I had faced so far, and I knew I had to come up with something, and the strategy that I then came up with was our only chance at victory. I placed down a bed and set my spawn. Using a gravitational potion, I was able to escape the high-speed worms. Whenever the worms would get close, I would recall back to the bed and continue the cycle. While I was focused on using the recall potions, my summons would keep dealing damage to the worm, gradually lowering his health. The worm eventually got so fast that my timings had to be frame perfect. I couldn't mess up even once. Even a single frame of error could kill me. As the fight was nearing its end, I realized that I was running out of recall potions. I had no clue who would die first, me or the worm. The fight was finally done, and the worm had been defeated. And at this point, I was pretty confused. I had gotten yet another hard mode item, the light disc. Since this is my first playthrough on the Zenith Seed, I had no clue if this was normal. I immediately discarded my summon loadout and took full advantage of the amazing melee weapon we had just unlocked. I wanted to go on the surface to test the light disc when I ran into Hive Mind, which is actually our next boss. And what happened next completely surprised me. I was almost able to kill him with zero preparations. Dude, are you kidding me? And this time, I killed him easily. I was taken aback. Just having spent multiple hours grinding the previous boss, I was totally not expecting the next one to go down in 2 attempts. He then proceeded to drop me every single damage emblem. Dude, hello, what? And now I was certain that the mod had to be broken. I'm really no expert at this, so tell me in the comments if this is normal. If this isn't normal, I'm trashing all of these. But hey, I think that that's it for today. If you haven't seen the first 2 parts, I highly recommend you go watch them. They're filmed in a bit of a different style, but if you enjoyed this, I highly believe that you'll enjoy them as well. But as I said, that's it for today, guys. See you in the next one. Peace.